Crickets or frogs, folks. Crickets or frogs. I'm still amazed at how there's a little bit of noise over the frogs. They sound like crickets. I think we're surrounded. I think it's over. We're done. Especially if you start doing what KFC wants to serve you. Edible coffee cups. For those of you looking for a cup of coffee, try this one. KFC is about to launch an edible coffee cup. You know, it looks like this old stuff we used to make boats out of. When jet skis first started getting made, they were made out of this expandable foam. Remember, as a youngin' going through and watching how they did all that. These cups look like that stuff. But you know, they're going to make it chocolate coated, make it taste like a cookie biscuit, and apparently you'll eat it. Because they're going to serve it. The heat-resistant chocolate-coated cookie biscuit cup called a Scofie cup are currently on trial. Boy, where's the court of public opinion here? You understand they put stuff in these things, these chemicals, to get these flavors. It's kind of like potato chips. Can't eat just one. You want to know why? Because they're just so darn good, that's why. Otherwise, they're not, and you're being induced into eating what you may not understand is not good for you. What I found amazing is they have at least three flavors that they're going to entice you with so that you can eat your cup. The little goats that you grew up from. Remember, I told you you're not a kid, you're not a little goat. Well, they think you are. You're going to eat your cups now. And you can get your flavor of coconut sun cream, fresh cut grass, and wildflowers for all you cows out there who like cut grass flavor. But this is what they're doing, and this is what apparently people will eat. And apparently they, you don't do this as a company. You don't put this kind of time and energy into something unless you thought that it was going to fly anyway. This is not that big of an experiment in some regard, but I don't know if my first thought was, yeah, that's what I want to do, is eat the cup someone else has put their old who knows where hands paws on, and fondled my cup, dragged it across to the countertop, and that's what I want to eat. That's what I want in my stomach. Just if you haven't figured out, these companies are now outrightly don't care about treating you just like an animal. They will just feed you what they want, and you'll sit there and accept it. Given you go to these places. And apparently, in the crickets I hear, that there might be quite a bit of many of us that do that. And so, if this is your cup of tea, I guess you'll eat your edible coffee cup. All you kids out there. Who are these companies that think of this stuff? Bidding back over to another thing. It's coming now. I always find it interesting how I discuss something, and maybe it's kind of when you buy that red Ford pickup that you never saw a red Ford pickup in the world. After you buy it, you find out that they're all surrounding you. Maybe that's what I'm seeing here. But since I was talking about you making it important for you to understand about the importance of your having a cell phone available and how to make that important for yourself, now almost every week, at least one story. Someone is literally saved by the video. The latest example of cell phone video vindicating someone from false charges is a doozy. It comes from Washington Parish, Louisiana. And one of the worst days of Douglas Dendinger's life began with him handing an envelope to a police officer in order to help out his family and to earn a quick $50. Dendinger agreed to act as a process server, giving a brutality lawsuit filed by his nephew to Chad Cassard as the former Bogalusa police officer exited the Washington Parish courthouse. The handoff went smoothly, but Dendinger said that the reaction from Cassard and the group of officers and attorneys clustered around him turned his life upside down. It was like sticking a stick in a bee's nest, Dendinger, 47, recalled. They started cursing me. They threw the summons at me, right at my face, but it fell short. Vulgarities. I just didn't know what to think. I was a little shocked. Not knowing what to make of the blow-up and puzzled, Dinger drove home. That's where things went from bad to worse. And this report goes on and on about how it gets worse. And these cops throw 2 felonies and a misdemeanor on him. He did have a prior drug charge that potentially could have put him in decades in prison for violating, apparently probation. And the system comes against him. And if it wasn't for a video being taken of him doing the process service, he would not have had the evidence to show that all the attorneys and the police officers were lying when they said that the process server attacked them. Now, you would think with that kind of evidence, you'd think that government officials would be going to jail. Remember, this is not a big deal. This is not an argument. This is not a philosophical discussion. When a color of authority uses its authority to diminish you and what you have right to do, that is a felony. But you realize that the Bar Association is involved, and you realize that's the extent of your rights. And why we ultimately sued them in our suit, and they didn't respond to the very thing that we suggested to the evidence was the overthrow of your government. The interference with the Republican form of representative government. And the cops, because of lack of prosecution by these very same bar members, believe they have license to extend the law wherever they will. And they get that because y'all be quiet. Now this report here explains something else I've told you needs to stop. And this is where the Bar Association has given license to government to be presumed to be acting lawful, and then you have to take it. You're supposed to be a free people, but no, the bar says you have to take their abuse, and because they give you the right to go to federal court and be abused some more under a lawsuit, and a civil rights lawsuit nonetheless, that is your remedy for this abuse by government. Now, I don't know about you, but there's no place anywhere I've looked in any of the founding documents, the organic documents, or anything else, except for the opinion of this trade profession official, that says that you have to suffer this in the first instance. That the law I see says when they take a color of authority and diminish you, that's a felony in the first instance. They should be in jail. And they don't because we remain quiet. We remain the crickets that they expect us to be and that they prosper about. The parasite gets fatter. And all I'm here to tell you, whipping it up a little bit on you, is that this is our problem. And that's why I just ask you over and over, find the wrong. I don't care how it affects you, as long as it's the wrong that you're passionate enough to right. Go do that. Just go do that. Learn your subject matter, learn the terrain, learn who you're up against, and devote some time, even a half an hour a week. This guy would have been in major hurt had it not been for a video. Just want to keep this out. We're in that day. Whatever, we lived in the day. We're in the day, folks. This is the day. This is the day when everything fell apart and really no one said anything about it. We're going to get to something about what you can do. Everyone says, I can't do nothing. Well, no, you can. If you go look around your state laws, I don't know. I haven't looked at I don't have the life to go through 50 state laws to find it all. That's why I ask all y'all who live wherever you live to go do it for yourself and then maybe even write about it so that others can see. At least get them in, get their feet wet. And we were talking, a little chatting over the worldtruth.org, the social network. I just kind of jump in when I can. I really don't understand all they have to offer. There's so much going on in what they have to offer to do. I can't keep up. So I even have trouble just running through my pages just to keep up with some of the chatting that's going on certain subject matters. But it came across taxes. And I'm not much on talking about the taxes because they are very dangerous if you don't set up your record. No different than I found the mining laws. Very dangerous if you don't set up an administrative record. But the comment was made about you have to have attorneys and accountants, and it occurred to me that's the part of the problem. That's the fallacy. You are the one that has to know the law. You are the one who's going to go to jail for not knowing the law. And so your knowledge has to precede your agents, which are these attorneys and these accountants, which once you're found to be a person liable, once you've exercised what the code says and imposed upon the commissioner to do his job, to make a hearing to determine that and all the prerequisites, then maybe you should have an attorney and an accountant. But to walk into an attorney and an accountant, you've already conceded your servitude. And to not make a record to show that you either don't understand or you can't understand or that there's no point to understand because it doesn't relevant to you, this is a major failure on our part. This is why I tell you, make your administrative records. We do live in the administrative society. But there's, as I found in the mining law, there's a part that can't be made administrative. Or at least for the most part. And so we try to stay there. And then those things that they try to presume upon us that are inside the authority, or they claim to be, how rightly or wrongly that might be, then we make sure we do our record for that side. That's the administrative side. Otherwise, we just say the administration side has no force and effect and no jurisdiction over what we do. You hear me say this all the time. So we have these problems that we create for ourselves in our own ignorance. And I don't say this in any judgment on anybody. They have us beat down. There's no doubt. Absolutely no doubt. And one of the comments by one of the original poster was that they were apprehensive. Yeah, listen, I've been before the courts, and I don't care how much I know, my knees still knock. I'm not embarrassed to say that. That's a truth. These people can kill you. It's not that I walk in fearful, but even so, even when I'm being in my best moment, my legs are shaking. I kind of did that when I did remote control boats too. I mean, you see your boat flying around in a big race. I don't know why. It's just an unnerving kind of condition. You're controlling it by a radio, but it's like so far away, and you got to be able to see what's going on. You got to do the pylons. You got to watch out for the traffic. You're there for a reason to supposedly win the race, or at least turn your best times. So for me, my response to this pressure, the instance is apparently my knees start to shake. Just a little bit. It's not a lot, but it's happening. And so there's an apprehension. It's not that you're not fearless, but you're fearless. You walk in with certainty. And how do you get that? You read the black and white. You read what you're supposed to read. You find out what the obligations of the government are first. That allows them to invoke the authority. Then you find out how they didn't do it right, because most of the time the administrative world is not man's world or woman's. See, they work on legal statuses, and you can accept them, or you can be smart enough to know what those are and challenge that they haven't been lawfully imposed. This is kind of what's happening with this net neutrality thing, that the FCC votes in favor of those rules in order to enforce so-called net neutrality. I told you be very careful on what they think, what you're being told what this is. And I cited that page that said that did a basic analysis that it sounded pretty right to me on the basic. I don't have, again, there's just too much for me to research over and over. But this is how this works. The FCC now has changed the status of the Internet into something that's a utility, whether or not they have any lawful right to do so. They've done it. This is an administration rule. This is executive branch government. And if you start to think that way, when you're told in school what these things are, you have to, that's how you categorize them. You look at what they're supposed to be doing and whether or not it's within their authority set in order to function that way. Now, I don't know of any authority for them to treat this as a utility. Now, we also know some other truths, some inside truths that don't want to keep popping up. This Internet was made underneath a military purpose. In other words, it's a net. There's no one thing that can be taken out in order to destroy the communication lines, which is really what the military was after. And they were very successful. It's now global. So there's other underlying things about why this is even existing that I've told you before. You cannot make a private web page on a internet. You will, and when I told you, explain that to you, and I haven't done it now for years. When you change the initial code that identifies it as a public document, HTML document, and you change that word to private, it will, and this shocked me when I saw it because it takes a subroutine to change it. It will remove that line and put it down a few lines into the body of not the body, but the header, meta headers inside the before it gets to the main display. It'll move that line down and it'll reassert that it's a public document. Now, why is that? You have to kind of think about that, because there's nothing private in this internet, and so and this utility thing is what's coming through is what they're trying to tell you. Now, I don't see how it's actually lawful, but they've went and done it. Everyone that's amazing who I saw, well, we won, we got net neutrality. I don't think they know what they're talking about. Kim.com was talking about the net neutrality, and they were saying it was a good thing, and I'm saying, well, why did it take 326 pages to say you got to be open, you got to be fair, and don't discriminate? So I don't have the knowledge to tell you how bad this net neutrality probably is, or that now everybody's a utility. You have to understand what they're doing. They've put you under a franchise. They've enfranchised everyone by using this way. Now, I don't think it can stand, and it takes someone to come up front to say it. I understand that if I heard right, and I didn't go back and read it again, just so much to keep up with, that again, Judge Napolitano, for as much as he'll say he hasn't done, but he has said that this shouldn't stand, and I would say that those of you that are interested, go listen to what he has to say, find the merits to what he says, apply it to what's gone on, and maybe you advance for the rest of us the cause that maybe no one else will. If you're not able, find people that might and help support them. And I say the word support, I'm reminded, as if you hope you were listening to Freaker's Balls to the Wall last week instead of Freaker's Ball, because Moosker was, I think, being hockey mom again. And Grimner finally gave us the first notice this year, and the only notice we usually get, that he's had to pay his server account or whatever that is he pays. And so he, as I ask every week for donations, we now have something in particular. If you can, donate to RoyalLibertyMedia.com to cover what he's already covered, to keep us moving and keep us going. And I appreciate Grimner beyond words at some level. And we've never met. It's amazing. All these people that we are, who we are. This little band of, as I understand also was Solomon calling in, we're the little band of black sheep here. We don't even know each other for a lot of us. Some of you have met each other, but not me. So I'm amazed at our tenacity without even more connection. And I would have to say to Solomon and anybody else who's listening to that, in the year of the sheep, it was identified that we might be the black sheep. But all those, at least at Real Liberty Media, from where that source came from, I think we're really the wolves in black sheep clothing. And so maybe if someone could draw that up, that'd be kind of fun to see. A bunch of white sheep, and there's a couple of black sheep, and inside the black sheep is the wolf. You already know you're making noise that the white sheep are kind of uncomfortable with anyway, so you might as well just go ahead and call it out. But so I think we're the wolves in the black sheep clothing in this year of the sheep. And I think we have an opportunity here. I think these are symbolic of things that we can do. What it's going to take is that we stop being sheep, black sheep, or crickets, and become those lone wolves that the government tells you it's terrified of. And I don't mean that in a terroristic sense, even though it's a terror to someone who wants to be in control of it, some psychopath. It's certainly a terror. The terrorism is only a system of government that rules by fear, intimidation, and dread. And so can't be, if that's internal to you, you are a messed up puppy. If not, then we can point the finger pretty directly to any system of government that does rule by fear, intimidation, and dread. And if that doesn't define most all the governments that we see today, I don't know what glasses you're looking through. You do really kind of look at that. And those that you don't need, you got those glasses slapped off your face like they've slapped off mine, and you see the world a little bit clearer. I can't say we see it completely clearly, but those of us see it a little bit clearer. almost it dictates how you will respond, I think, and I hope not to inaction, because again, the inaction's killing us. Now, those of you that did send in and maybe made a comment to voice your opposition to this, you have the first line standing, this net neutrality, you have the first line standing to actually go against them. You can write another opposition letter, but they don't have the authority. You can put yourself on the record to move into a federal court. If you can find the Article 3, that'd be even better. But you move into the federal court system and you challenge this. You be the one that stops this, like they have been finding like the Obamacare Act been unconstitutional, or the immigration was unconstitutional. Obamacare hasn't even been challenged on its origination in the Senate versus the House for its taxation of appropriations. Then we have the other one in Missouri over Common Core. The judge saying, no, you can't have an interstate compact without the Congress's agreement. That Common Core contracts, those things are all void. They're unconstitutional. You could be the one that causes those overthrows. Why? Because you were integrated enough to make your comment to give you standing. And that's the whole big joke around how this thing works in the courts. They want, you got to have standing. You know, it's funny how all the usurpers and the oppressors have standing. And you have to work real hard, but it's not that hard when you understand it. Like we were essentially talking inside the chat about the taxation. When you are in an administrative questioning set, when you're making an administrative record, this is what you would be doing with the FCC. It is an agency. It was supposed to do hearings. It never all did. They kept it secret. In fact, that was publicized. That would be your first evidence that they didn't mean to make it public and give disclosure. They have to give disclosure. Without notice, you've got a due process violation, don't you? So this is the discussion we had in the chat on the taxes. You engage the administrative side on the due process violations. And as long as that's in discussion, they really have the government cannot bring a criminal case against you because it's still not what they call not ripe. And so you could enjoin these rules because they didn't go through the process. You could be the one to do that. You could be, hey, enjoin these rules. They didn't. Nobody enjoyed due process. And this agency has certain requirements. You delineate what those are, and so let's enjoin these rules until they follow the law on promulgating the rules. That's pretty much the argument. You don't have to go on and on more than that, actually. And if that fails, you find another one. You do. This is you want to talk about voting? This is your vote. You vote in opposition. This is how this works. And then you needle in on the system that's corrupt. That's what you'll find as you move along. That's why we sued the system. The seats of decision is what we sued, because the seats of decision are admittedly oppressors, foreign agents, admittedly not committed to a Republican form of representative government. And I say that not with this patriotic flag waving thing. I say it to the extent of property rights, actually. Because I found out that that's the foundation. That's the law of the land, is your soil. And when that's not protected, you're done. You're done as far as a place to fight, as a place to. You shouldn't have had to fight, but they made that the battlefield. When they took it away from you, they made that the battlefield. And you didn't step up and say, "Wait a minute, you don't have a right to do that." In fact, as I keep telling you, if you look in your state under theft by extortion, a color of authority, any authority that comes, anybody that comes underneath this statement that they might have an authority greater than your own, is a color of authority, that if they use that authority or attempt to interfere with your property rights or remedies or other things, or they give those rights to a third party, which could be their boss, that is a felony right in the first instance. So we don't have to go too far. So, again, it seems pretty simple to me, the tools that we have available that nobody is using. We, Jefferson Mining District and myself and the other party into the suit, the three of us, and then the whole assembly. Oh, and that came up as a question, I guess, to Grimner. But the whole assembly is a party to that suit that exposed, in this nation, the United States of America, in particular through the state of Oregon, exposed the dastardly deeds of those that are in control of your life, and they agree they're doing it outside of law. Now, why that hasn't been brought up, why you don't think about that and say you have now empowered, I'm not sure why. I'm confused because we're laying the foundation that your whole existence has been adulterated and obfuscated and usurped. And then it should be at that point easy to understand why anything you thought you were going to do wasn't going to work. That just should, I would hope, invoke you to say, wow, now I've got the target. I know now why anything I do doesn't work. And that's where you go. That's what you attack. You don't sit back and say, okay, I'm helpless. Because if you do, you're the sheep. Just like the year of the sheep, you'll be the white sheep. You won't even be the black sheep, let alone the black sheep, the wolf that's in the black sheep clothes. Now, with the hot on the heels of this FCC ruling, and apparently this is changing, a lot of people have to look at this because I'm not sure if many who's involved, who knows about, I don't know him too well, so I'm a little bit lost as to, I think his name's Cliff High, half-past human. I hear periodically stuff that he does. And apparently I think he twittered something here. I kind of passed by and noticed that he had twittered that if this net neutrality goes in, his bot inquiry that essentially looks at language to predict the future will not be able to run because of net neutrality. The next thing that I noticed happen is that Mega, which is mentioned Kim.com before, PayPal now is going to deny payments to Mega through PayPal. And the interesting thing about this is that it appears that PayPal has somehow gotten some pressure from industry in order to not accept payments. Visa and MasterCard put pressure on PayPal to cease providing payment services to Mega. If you don't start to see the connection and the weaknesses and the servitudes that are built into this, whatever you think about Kim.com or his case or all, I can just tell you, knowing that it's the courts are corrupt, and we have them admittedly so. This is not an opinion of mine. This is not even just a statement out of just a good idea. We have them admitting through their actions and their non-action that the bar association that sits in the seat of decision is a criminal, is committing treason or sedition. It's not. These words are really kind of easy to get to. That you understand that the system then that these people were making decisions over, allowing the corporations to function, are no different than attorneys that were protecting the cop when they all claimed that the guy who was doing the process server was attacking them. This is the organized criminality that we're facing. That Kim.com is facing in the United States over his again. There's no, I don't know. He doesn't respond. I send him little notes. He never responds to me. I'm trying to explain some things that apparently even his attorney will not respond to. He's up against it, and they don't care about limitation. We get that out of the memo for the NDAA, but there's jurisdictional extensions going on. The judiciary is going ahead and doing whatever they need to do. Why? Because they know that he can't actually come in and defend himself. And so they take liberties. That's not justice. That's just the way business is done in the United States. And why that is because we keep allowing it. But so that you understand that Mega, which is attempting, at least in their statements, trying to make browsers that are encrypted. They're trying to make sure that your uploads and downloads are encrypted, a peer-to-peer type thing, so that it's like the talks where they can't get in it. They don't. These governmental and corporate plunderers don't like the fact that you get to go point to point encrypted. That's why I've moved over to Talks and got out of Skype. Or Jitsi, whichever one, and you should too, I think. And this is another thing. Right in the same days, net neutrality was okayed. Visa and MasterCard jumped on to PayPal and said stop allowing Mega payments. Now Mega has to figure out something else. Interestingly, this may actually support Bitcoin, because now looking for an electronic means to pay, they're forcing people to do certain things that as of yet aren't directly tied to the system, but Bitcoin is not really. Please do not think that it's a secret thing. The government has its fingers all over that. So, in fact, I was reading some documentation the other night. It looks like it was actually created. It is a tool created by the government. So be cautious. Again, I I don't want to be a judgment on that. We really have to start paying attention. I can only tell you I'm so far, coming from a technical background, electronics and computers, and now being so far away from it, has gotten beyond me. I don't understand how people who aren't in it can even keep up. That those things that you don't understand, you need to question. Whether you do it by withdrawing and not using, or as maybe we were talking in the tax law, you need to go to the commissioner when they try to send you something and say, wait a minute now, where was my due process? Where was the meeting that determined me, where was the probable cause that you thought I had a corporate activity, first of all? Secondly, that the activity was subject to tax. And thirdly, sufficient to bring me before you to have a hearing, and where was that hearing to determine me the person liable based on those things, what tax I'm going to pay, how much it's going to be, where what records I have to keep, and where those books are going to be kept. None of us have done any of this. In fact, now that I know how, I know I don't have to, because you also understand how to answer the letters. So they assume authority, and they get to beat you down. Why? Because you don't understand the first reason how to answer back and say, wait a minute, that ain't quite right. You had some other things that were obligated on you to do before you could make that determination. In fact, you couldn't make the determination. And so we start to, the way I think about things anymore, I wasn't born like this, folks. This is again, I had to get slapped really hard. I had to face my my termination, and that got my attention. So I was as compliant, and I may still be at some level. I also don't wave the red flag where I don't need to. It's not like everything's so peachy keen because I have a neat idea. These people will hurt you, they will kill you. And you see it. I tell you that every time we get on, we have more examples of this. So there is a system in place that you engage with that they are going to be in control of. And you are going to have to be quick on your feet about how you deal with this. Mega's been attacked now. They can't use PayPal. So maybe we could have a big flood of you shouldn't be in these Visa or MasterCards anyway. So maybe you should just tell them you've just lost customers here. Maybe you go to PayPal. Stop using the system. I don't know about going over to Bitcoin, but if that's what's left, start there. Figure out something new, something better. I understand that maybe somebody is trying to do that. But again, unless you're on the inside knowledge, be cautious. We're not helpless, but you can see the control structure, so you have to anticipate that. Certainly the convenience of going through the internet, which now is going to be a utility, it means everything you do is considered as a business, as a franchisee. I hope you appreciate this. I've talked about that. Remember, we talked a long time ago. I've talked about all these things. A voter franchise. It's just a privilege. And it's a very narrow privilege that people, if you don't vote, then you have no say. No, if I don't vote, it just means I'm not the status to have a say. See, this is our problem. You can't say, you got to, and I don't want, again, not judging anybody, but it's an observation. When you rely on an attorney or an accountant for your taxes, and you didn't understand the law, maybe they got you past to have the attorney and the accountant before you were actually lawfully having to have their representation and their expertise. That when you go and rely on those, you've already admitted that you are the subject of the tax, and you better pay attention. So we have our mind kind of on backwards a little bit from my perspective. That when we find out and we admit to the fact that these people impose upon you that ignorance is no excuse, and worse, they impose upon you the presumption that things that shouldn't apply in the first instance are. You only have to you can't be ignorant of the things that apply. You don't have to be, if I don't have to worry about the law, if I'm not in France, I don't need to have to worry about the laws of France. I can be completely ignorant of the laws of France because they don't apply. Similarly, the tax law, but see, there's a presumption that they apply. Now, that's a wrongful presumption. It's simply refuted by doing the administrative procedures to show they couldn't do what they just did. That's how you do that. This is the servitude we're under. We aren't free, because we have to do that much to keep ourselves protected against these usurpers who have no real basis to apply this thing in the first instance. And they do. And this has been another thing stuck in my craw. This seated decision, Bar Association seated decision, and these political parties agreeing that what they do in the legislature has the presumption of law. And it may not. And we found out, and I found directly how it's not. Because when you have people in the seat of decision that running in a social engineering agenda, they don't deserve that presumption. And we get things like this where you're subjected to Common Core, and then somebody finally steps up. As I've been asking you all, somebody step up and cause the question. And you too may get one of these where, as I said before, I mentioned it, here's the report, Missouri Court rules Common Core agreement with state unconstitutional. See, this was Common Core as the contracts and compacts interstate were deemed, presumed lawful. When they came to the test, they were illegal. They were unlawful. And yet they imposed upon people. Now, why that isn't a violation? That is a felony if I look at theft by extortion, folks. Why no one moves on that before, I'm flabbergasted at some level. However, here's the proof. Exciting news. Yesterday, Judge Green of Circuit Court of Cole County has granted a summary judgment in our favor on our claim that Missouri's membership fees to Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortia are unlawful under the Compact Clause of the United States Constitution, as well as, quote, state and federal law, close quote. So, the presumption is failed again. This needs to be a law in your state. No, you just need to flip this on its head and say, by the legislature's past history and the bar association's interference and the lack of keeping the fiduciary duty to make sure that only laws that are lawful be passed, we are now changing the law to say that the laws do not enjoy the presumption of law until they are been facing a judicial challenge where the bar is not a part of it. They're not the people that are involved in that decision. That's a conflict of interest. People don't even understand what's going on in their world anymore. So here's the fact. You can fight these things and you can get a win. I found it interesting they did it on the fees, which is an interesting problem. And you also notice the code word, Smarter Balanced Assessment Consortia. You know those 4 words are terror. They are a terror, each one of them. You know they're not anything that they're saying. They're not balanced. They're not smarter. They might be smarter, but they're not intelligent. They're smarter because that's an agenda. They're not intelligent. They're not balanced. They are only an assessment, which, if you know the word assessment, comes underneath the UN soft law imposition for monitoring and evaluation. Evaluation is that word assessment here. You're watching all the words of international foreign interference right in this, but see, that's not what was sued. They had to sue after the fees that went interstate. A consortia, well, that's just like a council or the consensus issues, the consensus policy. This is all right here in the title. They tell you who they tell you who they are. Why these people got this far, I can only tell you, has to be on this wrongful presumption that laws coming out of legislatures are lawful. Maybe at one time we could say that. I think it's time to throw that on its head. It takes somebody like yourself, a listener here, who either do it yourself or find someone who's capable to look at it in this regard and challenge these. So I got a couple of links for that summary judgment. That's pretty quick. Summary judgment goes, there's no issue. At the point in law, there was no issue that was a problem. Compact clause, I guess, is pretty straight up for y'all. So when you see these environmental compacts, like all that happened on the West Coast, those are all unconstitutional. Then you know our lawsuit was sitting right in there to predict that a year ago. So I guess the point I'm saying there is because again, your judgments aren't enforced until you enforce them. They're just documents, like everything. And the world seems to run on the way that the criminal gets, as long as the criminal continues to get away with it, they keep running. That presumption has to stop. If we're really going to apply the precautionary principle, it has to be on government and corporate activity. In other words, until they can show that they're not going to do harm by what they're doing, or that and the harm would be whatever. I mean, even up to certainly the law, it has to be complete. It has to be consistent with the law, and it proven so. Not because they say, not because they make the law and then say that it's okay. No, but a truly independent review. Once we get that thrown on its head, I think we start to orient our whole society a lot better. As I've been telling you, it's been really simple now that we've taken 10 years to get here. But when I look at the Forest Service laws about what the Congress has said the Forest Service must do, if we were to just have the Forest Service, instead of evading its duty to do what Congress intends and the objectives for why, if we would just have the Forest Service just even do three code sections or short paragraphs, just 3 of those, we would eliminate the main problems in the western United States for Forest Service land management. It's because that they haven't recognized these 3 critical foundational points that everything is in trouble on its head. And so it just takes us stepping up. Now, we're stepping up, we're doing the thing, we got the lawsuit, we got a judgment, we'll have to do the enforcement, we're doing coordination, it's taking a while. What we think in mind and spirit happens in a flash, the world not so quick. Which means we need more bodies, and why I've been a little frustrated that when we advance the fact that we've got the consent, the concurrence and agreement and conviction by the people that we sued, no one jumped up to say, we'll help you. What we got was, let us know how that works, how that works in the future. Let us know where that goes. When in fact, the demand on the people, the duty on the people, is when you see this kind of a violation, you're supposed to come with your buckets full of water or sand to put the fire out. So that's my frustration. Why we don't see that as a society, and as we don't see that, as we hear crickets, we're seeing the demise of whatever we think we're standing up for. Pencil lead scores victory in Supreme Court decision. Remember, I've been saying, let's not go to the Second Amendment where we take lead out of the barrel of a gun. Let's put lead to paper. Well, here's evidence, and I think this came from Gary. I'll appreciate his help pulling these stories out over the weeks. And periodically I can pick some up, and they make sense to me. And I think he picks them up because they say that. I use the pencil lead analogy all the time. So I thought that was why he brought this out to our attention. I thought it was important to bring it to your attention. An incredible victory comes to us from the United States Supreme Court in a decision that definitely coming down on the side of the people. In a recent decision, the people are being protected and government officials are being held accountable. The backstory of this was the backstory on this one is incredible for sure. Here's what happened. What happened was somebody, Kim Lee Millbrook, was a prisoner in custody of Federal Bureau of Prisons and attempted to sue the federal government in the District Court of the Federal Tort Claims Act. Alleged he had been physically and sexually assaulted by 2 corrections officers while a third one stood watch. The court refused to hear the case. An appeals court agreed by propping their contention on a faulty case law, as they often do, on the premise that the assault in the question did not take place during a search, seizure, or arrest. Now, the problem here is that he's facing what we face when we try to bring more substantive discussions to the Supreme Court. There's a gatekeeper. So I'm not necessarily agreeing with the first part of this, but what this gentleman does, it is quite amazing, and he did it with a piece of pencil, and a piece of paper. He writes a petition to the Supreme Court to have his case appealed from the 2 lower courts' decisions. They take his case. That's probably the most astounding thing I can tell you. I think they're saying in this report, less than 1% of the petitions submitted actually get accepted by the Supreme Court if you thought there was justice in this country. That alone tells you there's injustice, despite the fact that this gentleman who is in jail, who is suing to get a tort claim brought before the courts, he ends up prevailing. With a pencil and a paper, folks. So if you think you can't do it, I guess this is the other point about this. If you think you can't do it, this gentleman in prison with a pencil and a paper, he got his appeals overturned. Now, where that case goes, I don't know. But don't underestimate the lead out of the pencil over the lead out of the barrel of the gun. It's still there and available. It ought to be one of the things that you choose to do and not sit laying and wait like you think your guns are going to protect you. As I've told you, and I think you see it, they just start picking you off. They find those black sheep in the herd, and they pick you off. Another attempt to change things, Governor Georgia, Republican, nobody should need a driver's license. Now, I have mixed feelings on this. The point is what you need is you need a representative that'll advance these things. Republican Georgia State Legislator Bobby Franklin thinks that driver's licenses impose undue restrictions on the right to citizens' travel, so he proposed legislation to stop the state from issuing them. Free people have a common law and constitutional right to travel on the roads and highways that are provided by their government for that purpose, Franklin's legislation states. Licensing of drivers cannot be required of free people because taking a restriction of a license requires the surrender of an inalienable right. So, let's stop there. A lot of you are saying, yeah, right. Well, I can argue both. I can argue that even commerce should not be regulated. However, in the interim, we don't need a license when you come from the highway law. What you have, you don't need this law. With that law, my suggestion about this law was instead of saying that there is no driver's license, in other words, there's no commerce regulation. So in other words, you can have people who are making profit on the highway and they don't have to care about running you over, or they don't have to care about overloading their trucks. They don't have to care about what that does to the highway or how that blows tires out. And this is the part of that problem. If people were reasonable, we wouldn't need these regulations. But when you go into commerce where you're making money on how much you can haul, there has to be a constraint because people aren't self-constraining. And so at this point, I see the rationale, although I can prove otherwise, I see the rationale for regulating commerce. I see the rationale. But there is no law that says that people are restricted from their right of travel. What there is a bar association who sits in the seat of decision to deny that the right exists as to use of the law. In other words, you don't go to the Motor Vehicle Code, which is a commerce regulation statute, to find your right to travel, as I read that book in the state that I was in 2.5 times, and then I started laughing at myself. I realized, I'm not going to find my rights in this book. My rights are not inalienable. These rights are unalienable. They're not inalienable as a privilege. They're unalienable. They're antecedent the government. They're vested in me before the government exists. They're things they're a power that cannot be alienated from me. They're a possession that cannot be unilaterally alienated from me, where an inalienable right, an inalienable right, is a privilege that might be. That you will not go through the Motor Vehicle Code. You will go through your grant highway disposal law in the state to at least lay the foundation and then assert the challenge of where the state's authority comes to trammel that right. When the law clearly says in that section of law the state can't. The law that supports all this says the state can't, and it can't because it's an obligation on the state to recognize. And so in my view, even though this is a courageous statement by a representative, I think if they were to just outlaw, make it a crime for anybody to interfere with the right to travel and to right to use the highway as granted by Congress, make that a felony like theft by extortion, just a consistent law, that I think you'd stop seeing this fraud coming down that says that everybody's in commerce, or the imposition that you have to have a license to be on the highway. Your answer would be then, no, unless you can tell me the probable cause you have to believe I'm in commerce, you are on the verge of committing a felony to stop me here. You're obstructing the use of the highway. That's a crime. You don't do that. So, though I appreciate this legislature coming down and spouting the right to drive type issue, I mean the right to travel, you got to be careful on it. Driving is an employment for someone in commerce making money on the highway. As a traveler, as someone using the highway just for your private purposes, there's no authority here. And yet, the reason why it looks like is because the people in the seat of decision have overthrown your law, and nobody noticed that. The Bar Association is critical here. The political parties are critical here. If we can give it even a little bit of credibility for the political parties, they could literally be making the laws that stop the Bar Association from wrongly applying and making up a reasoning that makes it look plausible, their interference. And this is what I ask us to do as people. You have the right of either, some don't, but for those of us that have the right of referendum and or initiative and or maybe not either, we have to go to a representative. We can say, listen, like no different than we have to go, we need to go to the police policy now, because we're told the seats of decision in the Bar Association will only allow liability outside of the policy for cops, that we find out that historically, and the Supreme Court says you can be too smart to be a cop, you can be too psychologically stable. I'm here to rewrite your policy to make sure those types of people stop hurting others. You have to do that to your legislature. You have to do that to the laws of your state. You have to make laws that actually enforce the harms and crimes that are already in the law. That instead of saying that you have the right to drive, I said, no, there should be a penalty that says if you stop someone from using the highway they have right to use by congressional disposal, they are a felon. That I think that would be the better law. Why? Because it brings accountability. You have two options. The state itself stops the cop by a prosecution, or you do because you have a right of private complaint. And as a violation, a prima facie violation, you have an immediate action that you can do for civil liberties or rights deprivation. So, to me, anymore, our bemoaning our condition, our stating it's too far and too gone, that's an excuse. It really is. It really is. We have all the statement that we can do. What did you think you were moving into when we had this country that said, well, this is a difference in the world? Even though we have evidence that, maybe not so much, we were given a marker we could hit. We were given a goal we could reach. What do you think, in the face of all this corruption and fraud and social engineering and trespass and invasion, what did you think you were going to be able to do? Nothing? No. This required, as I appreciate this even more, this required us to be vigilant against these intrusions and move immediately to stop them. So I'm working off, I just noticed I've lost the internet, and I've lost a lot of things, and my encoder's still running for I'm moving over here to turn this thing off and on. My encoder's still running for the tape, so I'll attempt to get stuff going again, and I'll have to cut this out of the broadcast, but I'll keep talking. Hopefully we'll get everything back. I'm not quite sure what went on there, but it was on my end. For those of you that for those of you that hadn't heard me for whatever length of time, apparently that was on my end, and I just got myself back on, at least partly. I won't have, yes, they're all back on now. Okay, so I've been talking. We have an encoder running on a recording, so if you haven't heard of the broadcast for a while, and I completely lost all connection, so I don't even know if you guys are talking to me at all, that the post-production broadcast will have the file of everything that I've been talking about if you want to pick up what I've been saying. So I apologize for not catching that earlier if it was any length of time at all. So to refresh here quickly, what I've been talking about is that we are not helpless. Its obligation is upon us. It has been. The fact that you live in this country and accepted that it was unique in the world was our obligation to keep that. And there's mechanisms, lots and lots. The more I look at this and start to appreciate what I was told in school a little bit more now applied, I realize now we have a lot to do. And if we take the sit-back condition, we have given up. It's an excuse. There's really this was not a condition. The world, the way the world is not a condition of repose. This country, the United States of America, was going to be getting us as close as we possibly could. But as I've said a long time ago, we kind of jumped across the pond, we landed on the beach, and then we fell back into the water over time. We didn't really grab the mantle of the real condition that we could have. It's still for us to do, even this, 200-something years later. It isn't all over, although they're driving it to be all over. They're driving it to be the one world again. And remember, if we were described the United States of America as being the distinction, if they go one world, they get rid of that distinction. That's getting rid of you. Do you agree with that? Do you think you're helpless to that? So your town gets invaded and you get shot. What are you going to do? You going to stand around and get shot, or are you going to start defending yourself? To me, I've still got to, I don't know when it's over for me here. I still believe I have some time left. I don't like where it's going. I have a much better appreciation of what we've been told in the past in our history classes. And there's mechanisms for us to use, and that's partly also used against us. But they're there and we don't use them. If you're sitting back and not doing anything and making the excuse that there's nothing you can do, that is agreed, that's consent, and the provision was made for you to do something, and you just, the decision by the usurper is that you just chose not to. You see this over and over and over in court cases where you read the Supreme Court case and they're saying, or the appellate court case, well, the defendant or the appellant made this argument in the lower court but did not bring it again here. And so they kick it out. If you aren't diligent to continue your objections, they kick them out. It used to be they used to look at what you said earlier, to do justice. What they're attempting to do now is just to continue the control, and they don't care to do justice. You force them by your writings and your consistent writings and your consistent imposition and persistence on an objection. That's when you force them to have to respond. That's when you force them to have to create the plausible deniability about how they can decide to continue to violate it, or they have to give that to you. And so it takes the people to step up and rally up in places that I've been asking you to do a little more substantially than just to kind of like run out in Ferguson and you see the destruction that goes on. Yeah, it makes a social awareness, but the substance isn't there to change it. It actually becomes a division in the society instead of people saying, okay, what allowed that we need to make a policy change in the cops to stop that. That should have been the response. And I don't know how much effect we have behind the woodshed, anywhere, any of the hosts, anybody talking about these things. I don't know how far the ripple goes. I can only hope that it goes quite far. I see intangible evidence that what we say, those of us in the black sheep of the society, in wolf's clothing particularly, we are seeing the effect of our persistence in our statements. And I hope more than the whining that we see all the time, but to the fact of the substance of what we can do, that ripple effect goes out and affects people to where they start making the better decision. And so this is another reason why I fight a little bit. What am I always have the question, how effective am I? But everyone, I'm just saying, I just got to have the faith that I'm being effective, that somewhere, someplace, someone is taking the idea and moving it on. That whether or not it's a direct connection, it's still an effect. It's still, like I said, the bag of law in Florida of the Dewey stops. Perfect. Whether that came from me or not is irrelevant. It came out. It might have been that me just talking about it got that into, the social consciousness somehow. I don't know. This is the potential force and effect that we have, even if we're just speaking about certain things. Why I almost feel it's a crime for anybody to be speaking in the sensational opinion. Now I'm like, this Paul Craig Roberts, he was a Treasury supposedly insider, speaking the obvious now. I mean, and everybody promotes it like he's some insider. Talking about, we might get to it, I may not get to it, but speaking about this guy that got killed in Russia. This might have been a false flag. I answered back, you think? This was a setup against Putin. It didn't work. Gladly in a way, because this is some serious nonsense going on that's going to get a lot of more people killed. That if we don't have the insight and awareness about how this all works, we get played everywhere. That's very real. We're duped, and we're dupable. And if we don't take that to heart and understand that, like I keep telling you about the protocols of the elders of Zion, look at that as your failure manual. Don't look at that for all the hype that they put on it. Look at it as talking to you, and that's where your weak points are, your failure points are. And what that did for me is, after I got devastated by the fact that I was so clueless to all this clarity of my weaknesses, I was just absolutely blind to it all. It allowed me to focus on that and start to fortify against it. I had to take a whole different tack then after, and I have. And I hope you hear that when I speak, what I speak about, how I approach it, what I'm trying to guide you through. This is literally a different thought process. And this is where I keep telling you, as you go through this process, you'll know you're making progress. Every once in a while, your brain will literally feel like it's flipping over in your head as a new realization hits you, and it's like you see the world in a slightly different way. I can't say I'm really encouraged by that when what you're seeing, but somehow you're fortified by the fact, because you can see it, you can now address it. You can now confront it. You can now plan about it. You can now strategize, create tactics for it. You're not blind to it. It's not transparent to you. This is the thing that you hear, the transparency. They've been hoping they make everything transparent so you don't see them. I see dead things, folks. We put paint all over these invisible creatures. All these transparent creatures, we put paint on with this knowledge, with this observation. The transparency is them working on your weak spots. So, there's apparently coming a time here where maybe people have had it. Cop sentenced to death for fatally shooting a pregnant mother and her unborn child. You've heard every other thing going on in the world up until today where cops are getting off. Apparently this one's not. It's actually happening. An officer is being sentenced to death for shooting a pregnant woman and her unborn child to death. I'm reading this. They had to death twice. I'm sorry. I didn't catch that. But injuring her husband. The husband and wife were enjoying their dinner at a restaurant they owned when a cop came in, began harassing them, and eventually opened fire on them. In addition to being sentenced to death, the cop was ordered to pay the equivalent of $12,000 in compensation to the victim's family. I don't know how they come up with that one, but the money is coming from the cop's own pocket, not taxpayers. Boy, that's a cheap life policy, isn't it? The husband suffered injuries to his right shoulder. His unborn child died with the mother. A people's court has made the decision to sentence the cops to death in murdering the woman and her baby. Does it seem unreal to you that the cop is being punished? If so, it's probably because you live in the United States. In the United States, cops are almost never punished. In fact, this was not in the United States. The cop being put to death for his killing of people was in China. For all of you think America is the beacon of freedom and justice. Shocking to me. Folks, it's because we are silent. And this is all I can tell you. Here's the proof. Where people won't tolerate this nonsense for any excuse. I don't know that the death penalty is justice, but justice nonetheless is at least approached closely. There is at least accountability. Whether or not killing another for killing is still good, I don't know that I see that. Certainly it's a higher status when there's an unequivocal proof that someone intended and had no authority and then take somebody else's life out. What else do you do? Not like in the United States. Our example is that even a hearsay can get you put in jail for years and years, put on death row. And how many death row people now are being thrown out because some other people have it in them to go and find out that the justice system wasn't just, find out the legalities about that, bring them back out and find out that someone's been put on death row wrongly. Cop sentenced to death. It did not happen in the United States, folks. But it can happen. And so I ask us why, in the United States, have we not held that standard that everyone's accountable equally? What do you think would happen in Canada, where text messages show officers who shot 137 rounds into a car knew suspects were unarmed? Officer Michael Brello is preparing to stand trial on November 29th, 2012, shooting in which he and 12 other officers fired 137 shots at multiple unarmed victims. Brello stands accused of firing 46 shots, some while on the hood of the victims' cars. The shooting resulted in the deaths of Timothy Russell and Melissa Williams, two unarmed victims who fled a traffic stop. Brello claims that he is innocent, but prosecutors are accusing him, his attorney, and the police union of massive cover-up. Isn't that how I opened the broadcast? The seats of decision, those professionals, those licensed by the state, gang up together to protect each other. It's like we have a rainbow oppression. You have the brown suits being protected by the brown suits protecting the blue uniforms, all covered over by the black robe of oppression. Finally, emails show that this guy is a wanton murderer as a police officer. Brello and one of the other officers involved in the murder that night, James Hummel, exchanged text messages just after leaving the scene of the crime. The officers openly discussed being aware that the victims were unarmed. Enough said there. What do you think that would happen in China? I don't think these people would be alive long, and there would be a whole lot more accountability quicker than what you see going on in the United States. And I just suggest to you strongly to go read the Lieber Code again and see why that is. Why is it there's no accountability? And tell me whether or not that definition in the Lieber Code fits the bill better than what we saw happening in China, where they do have accountability. See, we have these little cliques, we have these little privileged classes of people, in particular, that were not supposed to happen in the United States, and they do. And no one has seen fit yet, or at least not enough of us, have seen fit yet to stand up against it. We are attempting to now enforce a judgment that we are still pulling together. I've been almost lost in research now since this thing with the governor being thrown out of office and his girlfriend and now we see the metastasization of the condition all going national. All on something we sued last year to try and expose this wrong that's sitting in the system appearing right, the color of authority. And we have people that are of gang mentalities. They have, in this case, that are moving into it's a religion that they have. It's this idea that they are superior, that their views should be imposed on everybody. And so you have the breakdown because of that. You have the breakdown of society in all kinds of different ways. I can't tell you, I mean, looking at it, it's beyond me to really fathom how wrong society starts to be, how much trouble people start having in societies where there is no certainty either. And that certainty that they are told is a lie. I can't imagine where we would be in other places. And I don't, because I can only see the end result. We have the United States of America having the largest criminal prison population. That's showing you how bad it is in this land of the fee, home of the slave, folks. I mean, it's just, the evidence is all around, and I hear crickets. And I'm telling you all this here, this last hour or so, there's ways and things to do, and we're just not doing them. But where our lives are being impacted by people, they're foreigners imposing foreign thoughts on our soil, enemies, domestic, foreign and domestic. Our lawsuit a year ago said that climate change is a religion. The people we sued, which is the Bar Association and the political parties and a couple of other people, a couple of entities and some people, agreed by not answering that climate change was a religion, and then we said that the states of monies can't go to support a religion. That we already have proof by their lack of answer, lack of rebutting the presumption of the correctness of our assertions in the petition to enjoin them, that global warming, climate change, sustainable development are a religion. That this last week, outgoing UN IPCC chief reveals global warming is my religion, my dharma. If you had any question as to the illegitimacy of this upon the people of the world as a general authority. If you didn't understand the green religion, if you didn't understand what this condition of the world is under sustainable development, we see the plan of action named in Agenda 21. We see it in all its different forms, like Common Core, like food security, like housing security, like land use policies. You are now getting the fact, if coming out of their mouths, if you didn't believe us or didn't believe that our lawsuit, when I keep telling you the lawsuit got their confession that they do, that this is the fact. IPCC Chairman Pakuri forced out of the UN Climate Panel after sexual harassment complaint. Pakuri's resignation letter on religion says, "For me, the protection of the planet Earth, the survival of all species, and sustainability of our ecosystems is more than a mission. It's my religion, my dharma." Enough said there. Just want to point out, this is what's coming down on you as you remain silent. When you people are going to be subjected to carbon tax, you are being subjected to a religious belief, the state funds of which are going to support. If you haven't figured out how screwed up this whole thing has made our governments, and we allowed it. Our so-called representatives allowed it, and we allowed it when they allowed it, and so I like to say it's coming back it's roosting on our shoulders, that we have a way to now engage this. It's now coming out also, if you haven't heard, again, NASA coming out, that says along these lines, geoengineering is changing extratropical cyclones, which drive most of the Earth's weather. So NASA is coming out through their technology to say that aerosols and emission transport, aerosol pollution is changing weather and climate. So now they have the UN conceding that one aspect of geoengineering is what NASA will call persistent contrails. And so they're admitting, and they have now proof, that they are changing the weather. And they didn't ask you. They're just doing it. They now have the proof that aerosols are changing the weather. This is not man-caused anthropomorphic climate change. But it is, isn't it? It's not you doing it, it's them doing it. And making a religion to tax you more. They tax from the wealthy, so-called. They tax from the people who will be indentured slaves and agree to it more than the rest who they don't have an infrastructure to tax. And they say they transfer the wealth to those people so they can bring them up to tax them. When in fact, they're just a middleman stealing from everybody. And you find out they're the ones making all the credits that they transfer for their easy living while they tax you. Tax you into cold. Tax you because you can't afford the carbon footprint that you have just to keep yourself warm. That's who these people are. Because their religion is that Gaia is more important than you, and everyone forgot to think we're all part of this. Everyone forgot that we're going to be a blip in the historic record of the Earth anyway, probably. 99% of all species have fallen extinct, and we're on our way to doing it for ourselves if we don't get smart real quick. And our science now tells us that what we do in the skies is actually causing the trouble, not you. Do-gooders. People that say that they're helping you. They're making your life more secure. They're making it more safe. They're making it more foundational. They're making it so that you are living in harmony. And it's all fabricated. It's a religion. Where are you, folks, that you allow this? I've talked to you about lethal injection. Clint Richardson, he reads in the last part of his movie, he added Title 50. He reads right in there, the government can do this to you. I've told you it's an economic construct. You find that out going to Appendix 12, Title 12, 95A, I think it is. The whole of Title 50 is underpinned by this, what ends up being the Trading with the Enemy Act, and the military being able to impose upon you. And that they're not supposed to do this, except they can. That it's up to you to start saying no. And as long as we haven't been paying attention to that, they've been getting away with it. Nothing gets executed except you when they want to. Nothing gets executed through the executive department without some form of notice, and they're supposed to get your consent. If they put that notice out and you don't respond, that's your consent. When FCC puts out the notice that they're going net to rules and you don't respond, that's your consent. And as I was saying, so what you have to do is you have to start making laws to start to outlaw this behavior, this conduct. As I say, there's things you can do. If you can't do it yourself, you get a representative to, as they just did in, I think, Tennessee here, the Fourth Amendment Protection Act. They're now advancing the code. This state in a political subdivision shall not assist, participate with, or provide material support or resources to enable or facilitate a federal agency in the collection of or use of a person's electronic data or metadata without the person's informed consent. A search warrant issued by a duly authorized court upon a probable cause that particularly describes the person, place, or thing to be searched or seized, and acting in accordance with legally recognized exceptions to the warrant requirement. Which, to me, that third one eliminates them all. The point is, take that one out, and you have the other two. You might be on the road in your state to start going up against this issue and this thing about taking your information through your phones, through the data, through the internet. You start to find here that it becomes a very important balancing act now for the states. You find out they're not so sovereign, if you ever thought that they were. So all you 10th Amendment people, you have a little different trail to have to go through here, and it's not very wide, and you have to be cognizant of it. But you can do this. You can start asserting back that the Fourth Amendment will be recognized, that the state will not aid in the interference. Now, this was something that we heard the so-called constitutional sheriffs saying. You have to go through my office. They were making rules, and this is another direct connection. Before you come into the county, you have to contact me. You're a foreign agent. As a federal officer, you're a foreign agent. The limit of that was the limit of the knowledge of the sheriff, and also his persistence to assert a protection. And I can tell you from experience, the federal government has ways to kind of destroy that in someone pretty quickly. But a lot of that's because of ignorance. Other things that are going on: coalition of police officers heads to D.C. to demand the broken and brutal police system be fixed. I'm glad to see it. Whether or not this is just hype or not, I don't know. Again, it's the people on the inside of the police forces that have become militarized, that are being quiet, that are allowing it. These folks apparently aren't having it, or at least they say so. National Coalition of Law Enforcement Officers for Justice Reform and Accountability is a contingent of the current and retired law enforcement officers and whistleblowers who will be meeting with a congressional delegation that includes civil rights icon. That's a problem, isn't it? He's just some little virtual mark on a computer screen. He's just an icon. Republican Representative John Lewis in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday to discuss policing reform. So, a cop, maybe you should find out whether or not he believes and should support what they're doing for policing reform. If you find out that there's the officers, the managers of your policing force don't agree with a policy change, when you see in the world what happens underneath the current policies, then you probably have an officer, some supervisor, some sheriff that maybe needs to be educated, or you need to replace him. That's for us to do, isn't it? It's not going to happen on its own, especially if these people are in like ticks, and they've been changing your system and they know it. In fact, we see that all the time. The alert should have went out. Those sheriffs that didn't want to be constitutional sheriffs ought to have sent the big red flag out, and those ones that we saw that did not want to be constitutional sheriffs, when you go put them to the test, they are not. They don't recognize anything more than the agendas that they've been supporting and hidden behind the scenes. Other things that happen behind the scenes that we know about, but you say it and you are then vilified because you just don't agree with the government, or you can't believe that the government would do you harm like this. It can't be that strange. It can't be what you're saying. Sandy hoax. It wasn't a hoax. You have to be some nut to think that. Well, it's coming out, folks. Amid al-Shabaab terrorist threats, officials reveal the FBI has been staging mock attacks in U.S. malls for nearly 2 years to test readiness. So the color of authority they use for doing these mock drills, and now you have to decide which one was and which one wasn't, is for readiness. To what? The fraud of a stateless war? The self-inflicted wound of having a bunch of people that came in from in canoes with camels and ACAT guns across the Atlantic and got themselves into Mexico and pour over the border, that big sieve they call the border down there, that self-inflicted wound, allowing those people in. This is what they're protecting it. This is testing what readiness? But the more important point is that they admit that through these discussions that they are staging mock attacks in U.S. malls. Where else, folks? Where else? How many times have we seen it? How many times can we show it? How many times can we show it all the anomalies and the incongruities before we start to believe it? And even in light of that most of these things, if not all of them that you see, are all mock drills. And we had laid out hope that the government was not going to fund DHS because of the clear failures and lack of actual need. A House avoids the DHS shutdown at the last minute this last week to go ahead and fund it for one more week, to kick the can down the road, to go ahead and create some political drama. Now you have to see what they're going to do, and I think this is just more, gives us more fuel to show how they are actually aiding and abetting the fraud on the American people. That when they declared the battlefield America, they declared it in earnest, and this should be something that you need to start to discuss with the representative that claims to be your representative. We fund all this, we continue all this, and then you find out Iraqi army downs 2 UK planes carrying weapons for ISIL. Congress is involved in this, undoubtedly. We're helping the people. Remember, we talked about this was a move against Syria. Is a creation and tool of the West. Now, all those little stories and accidents, so-called, that misdropping of weapons to is now proven. The Iraqi Parliament's National Security Defense Committee has access to the photos of both planes that are British and have crashed while they were carrying weapons to head of committee Hakim al-Zameli said, according to the Monday's report of the Arabic Language Information Center in the Islamic Supreme Council of Iraq. He said the Iraqi Parliament has asked London for explanations in this regard. You think? When are we, the people, going to say this is it? This is enough. What are you so-called representatives doing? Or get the heck out. You know, folks, we have the ability, people have forgotten about this, maybe. Your states can recall all your senators. And where the Congress needs to be approval of both houses, you recall all your senators. There's not going to be a vote to agree on all this nonsense until your senators agree to stop the nonsense. And when they go back, they set the stage, especially where the Republicans are now in charge, notwithstanding their neo-hawk proclivities. Just recall those people from the state representation into the Senate. I'm actually surprised that the Democratic governments, elected governments, like the one in Oregon, hasn't done that, just to keep out one more vote, right? So why don't we just go ahead and make that a universal thing? Pull all the senators back out. Just pull them out. Have each state protect itself. Because it's coming from you through them, right? That's what it's supposed to go through, the portion to the states, right? So we prove now, we got pictures of our allies, NATO, helping the so-called enemy, which is really their tool, so that's all figured out. And we're doing really a lot of bad things as far as I can tell. I guess that's like I said. I don't have a red phone connection that anybody's ever told me that the genius behind what we see in the world that's causing so much death and destruction, and bringing us literally, at least people are talking, to the brink of the apocalypse, if I can say that. World War III. I think we're at World War IV, World War V by now, with all the other things. But Jordan declaring it is, you might as well believe it. They're on that footing. You might as well believe it. That when you see the truth that we are supporting is, and Britain is dropping material to them and weapons, and that they're trying to take out Syria, that never went away. And saber rattling is going around the world, that we really are on that footing. And you all in the same week, just as they go in to allow the payment for the DHS, our self-inflicted wounds, you see that Britain is dropping weapons and ammunition, and then the United States, through NATO, goes over to Estonia and holds military exercises right on the border with Russia. I need you to see that the Russians didn't do this. NATO troops did this. Russia and NATO troops took part in rival exercises on either side of the Estonian border on Wednesday, highlighting fears that the tiny Baltic state could be the next target of the Kremlin's territorial ambitions. Is this the Kremlin's territorial ambitions, folks? This is let me read this so you understand. This is the Telegraph, so you know who not to trust. They literally have military on each side of a line, an imaginary border, looking at each other, folks. If you don't think this is right in each other's face, that any mistake here causes, well, I don't even know how bad it's going to get. I can't even comprehend how bad it gets if a mistake happens. You got two apparent enemies now doing parades for each other. I don't think so. NATO is not a country, that it has an army on a border of another country that is a country and does have an army for itself. The American Western influence, the Zionist influence, whatever you see behind the scenes, is really playing a dangerous, dangerous game. When you get it to the point when a mistake can cause abject destruction, you are playing a stupid, stupid game. And we're watching it. We're not saying a thing about it. Nope, we let DHF go another week. We pretend there's this actual thing going on. We're pretending that is really legitimate. We're pretending that the Ukraine situation is legitimate. Remember the mirror I bring up for us. What they'll do over there, they're going to do to us here. They are. You watch them militarizing everything. We cannot really remain quiet, or we accept. It's really that simple. Right at the same time they've got that going on, something very serious, I thought very serious, happens. The CIA may have just assassinated Boris Nemtsov in Moscow to blame Putin, was the story after Nemtsov was murdered walking across the bridge, which for Russia could be very, very serious. You're looking at what the Russian Spring, if you will. This Nemtsov was in opposition to Putin, although it appears actually that he's been in the pocket of the West. Now, Putin didn't really have a trouble with him, but killing him could be trouble for Putin. Now, Paul Craig Roberts came out to say that CIA may have been just assassinated. That's the Twitter I sent back out. You think? You think, folks? You can watch this coming out. It's not a hidden plan anymore. that the government of the United States or its allies or whoever is now, they just do what they do. We now have the eyes to see this nonsense, and we need to stop being quiet about that occurrence. The United States or NATO is attempting to destabilize Russia. They're trying to do it in the same method they've destabilized all of the Middle East and caused nothing but destruction and mayhem and murder of civilians. We now hear the museums are being destroyed, whether or not that's true, and those are actual, those aren't fake pieces. If so, we allowed that. The United States of America allowed destruction of history. It may not be important to y'all. I find it important. I find it important to watch the lineage of man going through what he produced in artifacts. Does it mean anything? Does it feed me in a day? No. It's just something, there's those intangibles that being a man and woman on earth and what we are and who we are and what we've done and what we can do is evidenced in these museums of where we've been. I think that's legitimate to have a memory for. That it's being destroyed by is purportedly because we, the United States of America and those allies, are shipping stuff and allowing them to continue. That all of a sudden we see a Russian Spring being attempted to be started over in Russia, and a supposed insider in Paul Craig Roberts, he comes out to tell us that it might be a CIA. That's not even a question, folks. It doesn't have to be CIA. It's a provocation. It's the fabrication of a martyr, isn't it? And the continuing stories I have on keeping track of this very, very serious thing is that apparently even the opposition that would have supported Nemtsov is not buying into his murder as being one for what Putin caused. I also found a video. Putin doesn't care about this guy. They've got their politics has got this all understood and handled. In 2012, Putin predicted there would be a martyr to cause Russia trouble. In other words, him and who was in charge. And Putin's doing a very excellent thing to keep his people not in the dark. He tells them everything, apparently, at least as much as that he can, to let them know this is what you can expect to see as they watch and their intelligence tells their people and informs their people of what the West is doing and capable of doing. So I have to apologize a bit. I have a link for you in the Blogcaster, and I do hope that you do go see the Blogcaster. There's lots of information that you can get on the links I talk about. Much better, I think, to see it as well as when you're listening, that you don't get on Spreaker either. I do have a link you can get on over to get the content. But I have a web page here that's in Russian. I believe it's Russian. I don't think it's Ukrainian. But so those of you that see it, it's more information on this matter of this murder. Now, lots of people are calling it a false flag or that it didn't happen, a hoax, but it doesn't matter. This was a very, very serious action that happens all at a particularly crucial time, all when we have army against army facing each other, that I thought that if you have a translator program you can do, if you can just get this link, read a little bit about it. It's a little bit awkward because it's translated, but at least it gives you a better insight than any information you're going to get, possibly any information you're going to get certainly from the West. We need to be very clear about what's going on. We need to be able to get through. This is the wonder of the internet, to be able to go find people on the other side of the world. That's where they live. They are living that. They're going to be more honest than anything that we're going to create as news that I go seek to try and find out, okay, what's going on here? What's the real happening? And that I think all y'all need to kind of keep track of. You don't have to get lost in it, but keep track, because we're going to be our witness of the wrongs are going to be the only noise, the witness, the rattling, the drum beat that we'll be able to produce will be the only one against the inciting of our society to go kill more people, to ask for more restrictions and security. Remember, there's always at least two things going on. They get their objective, they'll get the dominoes that fall advantage as well. We have to be resistant to all this. As even more information on the international front comes, leaked cables show Netanyahu's Iran bomb claim contradicted by the Mossad itself. The gulf between Israel's Secret Service and the Prime Minister revealed in documents shared by The Guardian, along with other secrets, including CIA's bid to contact Hamas. So you see the players, lots of finagling going on. Again, we are only told so much. This is some very serious things that are going on. The dropping of the ball of which is disastrous. We're at that day, folks. We're right on that cusp that you hope no mistake gets made here. I can't tell you, I had a little bit of a gasp a bit when I noted the picture, given that it's the truth, of the Russian army right across the imaginary line of the NATO army, all with weapons, everything ready to go, or ostensibly so, and you say, wow, this is that close. What opportunity can someone take here? A planned mistake even, that fires this thing off. Great restraint is required in these times, and we're going to need to know the limits so that we can maintain the objective basis and restraint for ourselves, not to get involved of that. That's been, even if something happens, we need to be able to calm it back down and be able to calm others that would just jump on the government bandwagon, like people do. They join the army because they were going to go kill the people that downed the towers. Had no clue, folks. We have no clue. We have no clue of how our lives are being. We're walking right into the matrix, the control structure. Moving on now from the international information here into more local things I tell you, really back to the silent weapons of quiet wars, big data and the technology handed to us becoming part of that electric circuit from which they feed, like the parasite that the government and the corporations under which get their authority are. Technology giant Apple has patented technology that makes it possible to track the phone's location even after the gadget has been shut down, if you don't think that they want to keep track of where you is. Apple has patented technology that makes it possible to track the phone's location even after the gadget has been shut down, according to the patent documentation published on the U.S. Patent Trademark Office. If you folks don't understand how in the future and how right now you're being kept tabs on, I'm here to tell you that you're being kept tabs on. That we don't understand this technology. We don't understand. They say, oh, it's for security when the phone gets stolen. They don't ask you about whether or not you really wanted that service. They're just going to give it to you for free. And what does this matter? Well, under NDAA, that starts to matter real serious. When you got a bunch of lunatics that'll stand an army up against a country that needs to protect itself, you're not paying attention. What a damage that can be wrought in your life. You keep using the technology, you move yourself into the silent weapons of quiet war scenario, and you become what they need. You're hearing about these Stingray cells. These are taking your phone, they hijack your signal, they make it look like they're a cell tower, they pick up your signal and they download it. They download the information on this. It's a device that can triangulate a source of cellular signal by acting like a fake cell phone tower and measuring the signal strength of an identified device from several locations. With Stingray and the other similar cell site simulator technologies, government investigators and private individuals can locate, interfere with, and even intercept communications with cell phones and other wireless devices. So they can intercept, and this phone now has the ability to talk to somebody to tell it where it is, and you're in proximity. You can't escape. Whatever they've fabricated is the real big problem for me. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has used such cell simulators technology to track and locate phones and users since at least 1995. Recently, federal investigators used a similar device to track down a suspect electronic tax fraud ring. Now, what if you are suspected of a tax fraud ring and you're not? What if you are considered to be right after a false flag or one of these mall shootings, to be someone who was investigating how you could do that, and they caught you up on your phone? What if they misidentify you? Because of people suing and getting information from the lawsuits, we're able to start pulling this information out of how long and how well covered this free people have been. If that, that's a joke. It's up to us to object, and somehow one of the ways you do that is don't start participating as best you can. You have to not let convenience overcome your better principle. Interestingly, it's taking the Russians to expose a lot of this as well. Russian researchers exposed breakthrough U.S. spying program. On top of that one, the United States National Security Agency has figured out how to hide spy software deep within the hard drives made by Western Digital, Seagate, Toshiba, and other top manufacturers, giving the agency the means to eavesdrop on the majority of the world's computers, according to cyber research and former operatives. If you don't understand how done we are. This information came out of Kaspersky Labs. Certainly didn't come from the Americans. Didn't come from the Chinese either. And they're the ones making those darn things, aren't they? So who's in this? Who's in this against people? The long-sought and closely guarded ability was part of a cluster of spying programs discovered by Kaspersky Lab, the Moscow-based security software maker that has exposed a series of Western cyber espionage operations. So it's because of a so-called enemy that we're finding out who the enemy really is. I also have a very interesting discussion on that, how omnipotent hackers tied to NSA hid for 14 years and were found at last. This is a very good article, a very detailed one from Ars Technica that explains this equation group function that was done to look into this. This actually might have been a more lawful way, because it was actually targeting certain people that they did have reason to believe were causing real trouble. But again, being addressed across all hard drives in the firmware that there's no way to protect against. You see how deep and how easy it is for the government to get into what we're doing. And again, my problem with this is the fabrication. They create it's like taking a tape and modifying, editing it in a certain way that makes it look like you said something that you didn't, that you intended something that you didn't. And when they work on the presumption and you take away through NDA due to indefinite detention and you don't have a word in your mouth, we're done. We're done. The black sheep and the wolves in the black sheep clothing can be picked off pretty easy. And so we're dealing in a technological age that's beyond most people. Certainly, I can't keep up with it at all. My little now infinitesimal insight, technology has gone so far from when I was into it, although I understand the basics of it. Where they are now is so far and away. It's just fascinating at one level. I like it, actually. But who's doing this is not what I like, and I don't think you should like it as well. But the Russians are helping us in this regard to expose what they're up against, to show that actually the whole world is up against it. Where they are also bringing out what they call an unhackable smartphone. Now, as soon as you say smartphone, I don't think of anything unhackable. As soon as you go to a non-intelligent phone, something called smart. Smart is this data, a big data problem. Anything smart is about big data. It's this new world oppression. It's climate change. It's about the carbon tax. It's about all this imposition. Russian firms developed totally surveillance-proof smartphone. Okay, we'll go with that. Maybe Russia is entering the post-Snowden world with style. Its own anti-surveillance smartphone prototype, equipped with the latest of cutting-edge cybersecurity and intended for corporate users, is currently being tested. And I read that and I kind of laughed because I've told you, if you want anything in the world done anymore, to find out about how to work the world, just go ask like a 13-year-old. They'll tell you about it, and probably within about 20 minutes they'll have it hacked in some regard. And so this unhackable, and that word was in quotes, this unhackable smartphone, in quotes, I think will meet this kid. 14-year-old hacks car with a homespun kit with circuits bought from Radio Shack. A 14-year-old now hacks into what was thought by experts to be an unhackable system. It was a contest of sorts, but he didn't listen to the experts. He didn't take their guidance. In fact, he threw it off to think his own way. A 14-year-old now. So this unhackability, the 14-year-olds might be our future, folks. Make one a friend today and have him show you how to hack into your own system. Maybe you'll learn something on how it gets hackable, hacked so that you can protect against it. Because these experts don't have a clue on how to be protective of you. But where a school kid hacks car in a security camp leaves experts dumbfounded. It took 14-year-old boy to stun the professional engineers, policymakers, and white hat security experts. The boy, who was a part of a 5-day camp for car hacking and cybersecurity called Cyber Auto Challenge. The boy, who was 14 and looked like he was 10, as per Dr. Andrew Brown, Junior VP of Chief Technologist of Delphi Automotive, took up the challenge of remotely hacking a car. The actual procedure for the participants of the camp, including the school kids, was to take help of the assembled experts and attempt remote infiltration. Our boy, however, had different ideas altogether. He chose to go to hacking the car all alone without any guidance from the experts available. At night, he went to a Radio Shack, spent $15 on parts, and stayed up late into the night building his own circuit board. What he did the next morning, flummoxed experts early morning he used a homemade device to hack into the car of a major automaker. Within minutes, the 14-year-old had the car windshield wipers turned off and on, had demonstrated his hacking skills with the wipers. The boy unlocked and locked the doors, and remotely he could remote start feature the car, but this thing he made up. He did it through an iPhone, and so then he figured out, well, I'm going to make this a little bit of show. I'm going to make the lights flash to a song that I play on my iPhone. The people who ran the Cyber Auto Challenge event refused to reveal the boy's name or the brand of the car he was successful in hacking, but they confirmed the 14-year-old's exploits. I won't read any more. The point is, give your technology to a 14-year-old to hack, and he will flummox the experts. And that means that some other 14-year-old who isn't so nice may be attacking you without your knowledge. So all this information that we get, there's just nothing that some 14-year-old can't hack in the world. Don't believe your experts. Don't believe your professionals. Don't believe anybody. You have to see it for yourself. There's nothing that's unhackable. Fascinating story here. Kind of reminds me, not that I did computer hacking, because we were still at teletypes when I was in school, but the type of hacking I did was really in the sciences, doing things that you're not supposed to do when you're that age. That's, I think, what 13 and 14-year-olds do. I think that's just part of what they do. But I don't know that we appreciate what that might be for us as far as a lesson and a insight as to how vulnerable we are as people when we rely on all of this technology and don't maintain in us some basic foundational and fundamental principles and abilities. And that ability to keep those is being taxed as we now see more studies coming out as the corporations hacking the climate, putting aerosols in the air that NASA now shows is changing the climate by itself, just the aerosols that are put in, which we knew. There's natural aerosols too, but see, they didn't talk about the man-made aerosols that are done without any check and balance. But we're finding now in tests that 75% of the air and rain samples contain Monsanto's Roundup. Biotech isn't just tainting the food supply, it's going after the air. But take a deep breath. Thanks to massive use of herbicides across the planet, you likely just inhaled a dose of Monsanto's best-selling herbicide Roundup, at least according to the U.S. Geological Survey published on the journal Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry. That's just for your information. Go check it out. I got the link. You'll get it in the Blogcaster page for those of you that are interested. Read it for yourself. Vaccine versus virus, I thought was a very interesting question nowadays when you find out when the vaccines are the actual threat. The question is, which is the bigger threat, the vaccine or the virus? And it goes on and discusses maybe it's not the virus anymore. As we found, measles wasn't such a big deal. Now it's supposedly those that are not affected are actually transmitting the disease, and the denial is that the ones that are vaccinated, that the science says can transmit the disease, is being not observed by the officials. Notwithstanding, as said last week, the main thing you need to do is go to the product liner, find out the disclosures that are there, and if you read that and you can eat your lunch after that, when you finally realize what they're saying, well, you got a stronger stomach than me, and maybe you're a lot more bold and brave to accept their immunity against harm to you. Vaccine versus virus, I thought it was very excellent discussion, a very excellent thought. What is more dangerous? This is essentially what we're saying now. Has it become that the vaccines themselves are more dangerous than the virus? What are the odds? What is the transmission? What is people? What is their resilience, their natural immunity over a century? What has that done? What is the fraud behind the pharma stepping up on the downside when that was declining, that they took credit for it? Study links common food additives to Crohn's disease and colitis. For those of you that are, you don't even have to have these diseases to the level that they can be identified. You have some feeling, you start feeling bad in this is what happened to me a long time ago. I just wasn't feeling good in my stomach. There was no real reason for it. And I just started looking at all the foods, and I said, well, let's start cutting out some foods. I had allergies. I don't know where this came from either. Common additives in ice cream, margarine, packaged bread, and many processed foods may promote an inflammatory bowel disease, ulcerative colitis, and Crohn's disease, as well as a group of obesity-related conditions, scientists said on Wednesday. So I won't read any more. Some of you that are into this know this stuff. I, decades ago, changed my diet, particularly when we were eating margarine at the time, because it was the thing you did. I can't believe it's not butter. Well, I can't believe it's destroying my innards, so I stopped eating that. Started eating better bread, stopped drinking Pepsis and Cokes, all that stuff. Just cut it. I just completely dropped it. I was shocked at how fast your body got better. It feels better. It's not feeling so bloated or bad or pain or whatever, kind of lingering things, not even to these diseases. The researchers focused on emulsions, chemical additives to make food products to improve the texture and extend shelf life. In mouse experiments, they found that emulsifiers can change the species composition of gut bacteria and induce intestinal inflammation. And your gut is that's where your mind is, essentially, folks. It's the mind of the body is in the gut. You mess with that, you're messing with your whole being. And we talked about these emulsifiers extending, improving shelf life. McDonald's, French fries, and hamburgers. Remember, what was it, Iceland? They have one that's been lasting for 2 years. How much emulsifier must be in that? What about your styrofoam, your cookie cups from KFC? What do you think is going to be in those? I hope they have an antibiotic and an anti disease coating on the outside for you to take, while someone's put their mucky old fingers all over the outside and drags it across the counter for you. When you go pick it up and stick it on some other counter that someone's been hacking on, I hope they have some antifungal stuff on it also. Man-made food allergy epidemic. It's not just peanuts. So this is what I was talking before. Early on in my life, I started getting I'm healthy. In fact, I shouldn't be alive today. I'm so healthy that I didn't die when I should have died. I've talked about that report. That the 4 day you get this sepsis in your blood, you die. It's 4 days and you're dead. I didn't die from that. That's how healthy I have been, and I feel blessed for that. But early on, I had allergies. Didn't know why. Well, I noticed now when I look back, there was food quality additions, food quality problems happening. And it was about the time that allergies came in. And here we finally, years and years, decades later, man-made food allergy epidemic is man-made. It's made by what you eat. It's wonderful not to be the lone voice on the internet trying to get through to people that the main cause of all food allergies is vaccinations and injections, and the secondary cause is antibiotics and other drugs. And you find out the additions they put in your food are these other drugs. These additives act like drugs. And so now we have a connection to your food additives, to your antibiotics that's been added to the foods through any number of avenues, like through the protein, the meat side, whatever derived from there, and now vaccines on top of it. All these chemistries are going into a body that the body responds to. I found the connection once I started reading patents online. Then I started to look at every angle that I could think of to disprove what I found. Instead, I found more and more evidence. The evidence is overwhelming. I was shaking when I put it all together. That was towards the end of 2008 and the beginning of 2009. And this story goes on and on. So there's more about these vaccines. There's more about the additives, and they are causing nothing but ill health. And those are okay with the government. The vaccine hoax is over. Documents of UK reveal 30 years of cover-up. I thought I covered this before. If not, I've got it again. It's known that vaccines don't work. It's known that they cause diseases that are supposed to prevent. They know that they're hazard to children and little kids and little goats. They colluded to lie to the public and work to prevent safety studies. This is all listed in one document itself. You get the study. You get the FOIA request. So from the UK to prove out more and more, put in a bag of facts that at least causes the question against some expert, some professional who makes money to deceive you, to say, wait a minute, I think I have at least a matching objection that's at least as authoritative as you trying to make me hurt myself. I think what you're trying to do is a felony, and I think you have the cause and you have the burden to throw that off by showing me how I don't. Here's the package insert that says that I'm going to be harmed by the use of this. What right do you have to cause me to poison myself or the ones I love? Now, one little other thing I'll throw in quickly here is a neat little idea. I don't know if it's viable. The only thing you get to do is it's called a honey on tap. It's a beehive. It's called the Flow Hive. I thought it was just a really cool idea. Apparently, they asked for $70,000 on a Kickstarter campaign. It's almost up to $4 million now that this thing is such a cool little idea. Really, you still have to be a beekeeper, but the neat thing about it is the way the internal hives are made is that you turn a crank and it actually evacuates the honey out. Now, I kind of figured out the way the thing is priced, I'd need to be able to eat about 15 gallons of honey to pay for one. I don't think I've eaten a gallon. Well, maybe I have. A couple gallons in my lifetime so far. So you'd have to eat an awful lot of honey to pay off one of these things. But it's just a cool idea. I wanted you to see it, maybe give you something to focus on and think about. And you're looking toward a more healthy way to avoid having to deal with pharma and such. So with that, I think we're done for today. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope you can pull together what I've said. I know it kind of goes through fast, but if you can pull together tools to give yourself empowerment, that's what I'm trying to do behind the Woodshed. We get the principles that we weren't told that really are sitting for us to do, and then the other principle, the main one, is that you can't be silent. The silent war against us, they win with your silence. It's pretty clear. So thank you for tuning in today. Again, support all your networks and do what you can where you can, and pass the podcast around, pass the links, and we'll see what we can do together. It's not going to be any one of us, and each one of us has the ability and the power, given that we focus